by-election in Victoria. Well, joining us is Liberals MP Andrew Hastie, as always. Andrew, good to have you with us, and I'm pleased to welcome Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young as well. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Australia has a non-discriminatory immigration policy and humanitarian policy. So, Andrew, why is it that when we talk about something like the South African farmers, we immediately man the barricades and the question of race comes to the surface?
Well, good to be with you, Stan. Since 1977, we've had a very generous humanitarian program. We've taken in Vietnamese people, people from Lebanon during the Civil War, people from Albania, Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia, East Timor, and more recently in 2015, Syrian refugees. So we don't discriminate on colour at all. The question is, are people being discriminated against or persecuted in the land from which they come? And so when it comes to South African farmers, they're a minority, and I think they are being persecuted, which is why I've been advocating for them.
Well, Sarah, you know, if we look at the number of attacks, more than 200 or so over the past year, around about 90 people killed. It's hard to get exact numbers here, but if there is a case of a minority and persecution, would this not fit?
Well, I think the point here, Stan, is that every individual case for asylum and protection needs to be assessed on that individual's genuine and well-founded fear of persecution. That's what our obligations are under the Refugee Convention. That's what our humanitarian program is meant to address. I think the problem we have here is that this is being put forward by Andrew and indeed Peter Dutton, and I see this week, of course, also Tony Abbott weighing into this debate in the context and in the backdrop of what has been a systematic rejection of help and assistance to people, even in our own region, when they come to our shores asking for help and protection. We have hundreds.
Can I just come in on that, though? I know the point you're making, and I've heard this made, and I'll come back to Andrew in just a minute to get a reply on it. But is this the danger of this equivalence, that we say, OK, we've got this case in South Africa, but what about these people, and not being able to look at things as they appear, as they present themselves on their merit?
Well, look, I think that is the problem, and that's what happens when you have the advocacy to fast-track a certain group of people because of who they are, where they come from and what they look like. And I don't think the advocacy from people like Tony Abbott saying that these people should be fast-tracked because somehow, because of the colour of their skin and their background, they're going to fit into the Australian community better. If people need humanitarian assistance, we have an obligation to help them. It doesn't really matter where they come from. It matters whether they actually need protection.
And Andrew, some of the language around this, has that obscured the issue a little? If you're using words, as we've heard, like civilised, or talking about people who will fit in better, and the inference there that the colour of the skin may have something to do with it, has that been a failure in the communication of this?
Well, look, Stan, I think people are pretty quick to play the race card. For example, in my maiden speech in 2015, I said I was very proud of the coalition government's intake of 12,000 Syrian refugees. But as soon as we moved to a conversation around South African farmers, people started talking about us dog whistling and playing the race card, which I think just entirely besmirches the character of the Minister, Peter Dutton, which is what Senator Nick McKim did today, which I think was totally inappropriate. And again, obscuring the fact that we can have a conversation about South African farmers without reference to their race. They are a minority, they are being persecuted, and on those merits alone is why we are advocating for them.
OK, Sarah, I want to come to what Nick McKim had to say. And again, the language that's used around this, the language coming from Nick McKim, using words like fascist and allusions to the Nazis, does that help?
Look, I think whenever we talk about immigration, and in particular helping people who are refugees in this country, it's polarised. And I'll tell you what, it started from the day that John Howard decided to say we wouldn't take people who are arriving by boat because they might be dangerous. It hasn't stopped since then, and it's gotten worse and worse.
But that's my point. That's my point, Sarah, because we're going back and forth here. We do have a non-discriminatory policy, and we're talking about a group of people who are persecuted. But I'm going to the language here. On the one hand, using words like civilised or that people will fit in better. But on the other, accusing people of being fascists and racists and Nazis.
Well, I think the problem we have, Stan, is that this is an immigration minister who systematically, every couple of months, is drip-feeding out policies that are harking back and have echoes of the White Australia policy. We had issues in relation to changes to citizenship rules based on how well people could speak and read and write English. You know, if that was the case, we wouldn't have amazing communities here in Australia from people who have come from Greece or Italy or Vietnam. I mean, we are a multicultural nation. We are a proud multicultural nation. You don't start pinpointing whether people deserve to be Australian or not based on whether they can speak English. And so this is part of the problem. It has been drip by drip by drip. And then we hear Peter Dutton saying, you know, a couple of weeks ago, well, now we want to help white South Africans who should be fast-tracked. That is what he called for.
Okay,
and we have to reject that.
You've made that point. I'll go to Andrew. Andrew, you have not used the word white, and you've been very careful not to use any reference to colour here. But I do want to put to you a scenario that has been around, has been used by critics of Peter Dutton this week, and that is that if, for argument's sake, and it is a hypothetical, that a boatload of South African farmers arrived, would they end up being processed in the same way as others and being sent to Manus or Nauru?
I think they would be, because we have ways and means of coming to this country, and we want to make sure that we uphold the right channels so that people don't jump the queue or come here illegally. So if white South African farmers came by boat, they would find themselves in an offshore processing facility. I guarantee you that. Look, Stan, last night I went to a citizenship ceremony, and I read the Minister Peter Dutton's statement to all those who took the oath to become Australian citizens. And I can tell you it was a wonderful picture of diversity, people from all over the world. I've been doing it for 2 years now, so to suggest that Minister Dutton is somehow imposing a new standard is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, he didn't get it through the parliament.
Different cultures, different colours. And so, you know, it's dog whistling to the Green Left, unfortunately. And, you know, it's the coarseness of today's political dialogue, unfortunately.